So, okay. Engels sal dit wees. I was just scouting you all to see who doesn't understand Afrikaans, and then I realized there are people. We will keep this in English. Her story, his glory. We're still there. And it doesn't matter whether it's her story or his story, it's always God's glory. So that is the theme of this month. And as you could see on the family group, my title this morning is 3 Unexpected Vessels. So I want to start by asking you a question. And you may put up your hand this time. Who of you, when you woke up this morning, thought of the influence that you would have on someone's life today? Okay. Sy's 'n mamma, verseker. Anyone else?
I'm not so much thinking about it, but I see that I am influencing somebody's life.
Today, absolutely, by your testimony, definitely being here. Okay. We can say for better or for worse, because sometimes our influence is not that positive. And other times, it's a very positive influence, and we encourage people to carry on. And that's what we've been doing here a little bit this morning, encouraging one another to carry on. And I want to share something very personal with you. Please don't look at me and don't look at my story, but look at the victory and that God has given in this area. When I was growing up, there was an unspoken rule in those years that as a young girl or a young woman, you had to learn how to sew and cook and bake and all these things. And many moms stayed at home. Many of us were stay-at-home moms. I never really wanted to learn how to cook, and today I still can't cook properly. But I'm getting there from time to time. But I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mom until my children were around 12 years old. I could be there for them, encourage them, never realizing the tremendous influence that I had on their lives. Just by them watching us as parents or as a mom or as a dad or whatever. And I never realized as a wife I could influence the atmosphere in my house. Ladies, did you know that? They fall apart if we don't stand strong. And we are the emotional ones. So I never realized as a woman that was part of our makeup, is that we can determine the atmosphere in the house. Also, our children watch us to see how they will react or should react to certain circumstances in one's life. And we never realize the influence that we have on them. My daughter, for those of you who knows her, I think she's beautiful and I love her to bits. But when I was younger, she looked a lot like me. I had such a low self-esteem because of abuse when I was a teenager and younger, and I really hated the way I looked and hated myself. Often making remarks about how short and ugly I am and never skinny enough, and you know all those things that our girls go through. I could never accept a compliment, not even from my husband. I always thought he was just saying it or he's lying. Not that he was really romantic, but I couldn't accept these things because I had this picture in my mind of who I thought I was. And then one day I heard Adele say that she was ugly. Remember, people told her how much she looked like me. And what was the result? If my mom says she's ugly, thank goodness she's not as short as I am. She had a tall father. What was the result of that? What was the influence that I had? What do you think her conclusion was? That she's ugly as well. That she's not perfect enough. When I heard that, I was so shocked. Because I thought she was beautiful. I realized that I had to allow God to heal my heart and to heal my emotions. Because I was rubbing off on someone young that still had a life in front of her. So I explained to her what was going on, and we asked God to show us what He sees when He looks at us. And He does. He did, and He still does. And today I'm so thankful to say that my daughter does not believe a lie anymore, but she celebrates who she is. Just explaining in simple things that we do at home or wherever we are, the influence that we have on people's lives, especially our children or close relatives. Do you realize how much influence you have? Not only at home, but at your work, wherever you go. Without knowing, sometimes we even tell people what their identity is. And it's not always the truth, because we need to see what God sees. And that is where my story comes in this morning. I want to talk about the influence that 3 people had in the history of Israel. Deborah, Barak, and Jael. Combined efforts that they didn't just win a single battle, but they changed the lives and the destiny of Israel in those days. They helped restore Israel's faith, and they reaffirmed their identity. And Israel again submitted and followed God as their true God. So these unexpected vessels. Let's look at a bit of background. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites just went haywire. They went off, they forgot about God, they married into the neighboring nations, and they turned away from God. And the Bible specifically say in a few places, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So they became slaves with the nations around them, and then they served the gods of these nations, sometimes for 7 years, 18 years, and in this particular instance, for 20 years. They were slaves serving other nations, forgetting about their God, starting to bow down to other false gods. And then after so many years and the oppression, they would cry out to God. God would hear them, raise up someone as a deliverer that hears God, that obeys God and follows God. God helps them to win the war, and there's a period of peace. But then the same cycle repeats itself. And we're reading from Judges today, where I think, if I remember correctly, Deborah was about the 4th or 5th prophetess or judge that we read from in Judges. So let's read Judges 4, 3-9. Please go home and read Judges 4, chapters 4 and 5. The whole story of these 3 are in there. So, Judges 4, 3-9. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help. For he, that is Jabin, the king of Canaan, had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. They were in slavery for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife, oh please guys, I'm going to slaughter these names, forgive me this morning. The wife of Lapidith was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and people of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera. I will draw out the general of Jabin's army to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. This is what God said to Barak. So Barak said to her, If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. Very brave, wasn't it? And she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory. For the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went to Barak, to Kadesh. So let's see whether this woman was Deborah. Maybe not. Here we meet Deborah, a prophetess and a judge. So what do we hear from her? What do we read? And what do we learn from her? The first thing was, this is a very rare occupation for a woman in those days. I think she's the only judge that we can read from in the book of Judges. The only woman that fulfills this role. She listened to the people, and then she gave them godly advice. She prophesied and prophetic guidance and wisdom, and she would answer their questions. She's an example. The second thing, she's an example of a woman who has got faith in God. She didn't just do her own thing, but she listened to God and then spoke the truth with authority. So she was obedient to what God wanted her to say and do. That's why she could Barak call him and say, hey, come on, do you remember God spoke to you? What happened to that? Thirdly, she did not dominate, but she worked together with people and encouraged them and called them into obedience. She called them to be obedient to God. So she was just an instrument in God's hand to encourage others and help them. She provided an example of moral and spiritual leadership. And any leadership doesn't mean anything if it's not submitted under God. Leadership itself, if a leader doesn't know how to submit, he or she cannot be a leader. That's where it starts. Because we need to submit wholly, completely under God. She had faith over fear. She saw beyond the battlefield. There was going to be a battle. God said he will give them in their hands. They will win this war. And she saw that. She saw the victory beyond the war or the battlefield that they were in. And just for interest's sake, trees were landmarks because it says the palm of Deborah. So trees were used as landmarks. They didn't have street names. So you know what? That palm where Deborah sits, it's Deborah's palm. And that's how they sort of talked to each other and showed each other where to meet. And trees were often in the heat a place of gatherings, especially for spiritual, religious activity and justice. So she had her own palm tree where people could meet up. You'll find her there. So that was the assignment. That was Deborah, who called Barak and said to him, "Hello, God has spoken to you, so what has happened?" But who was Barak? He was the commander. He was the one that was sent out to war, to win the war. And what can we learn from him? Although he's very hesitant in the beginning, he still obeys God's call. He says, "Okay, I will go, but I need you." It's as if he was saying, "I acknowledge your spiritual authority. We sort of need God with us. I can't go without him." His humility in sharing leadership allowed God to unfold his plan. Do you hear me this morning? Sharing leadership, sharing ministries, sharing, helping one another often unfold God's plan. The story also tells me, when I read that, I just thought, you know what, you can't distance yourself from God's calling. There will be people who can help you in the process. They can support you, they can encourage you, but they cannot take over from you. They cannot do it because you don't want to. So we cannot run away from the calling that God has got for our lives. It also teaches us that courage often grows when we're together. When I'm on my own, maybe I don't have that much courage. But if we stand together, if we do this together, we can do this. And Jesus sent the disciples 2 by 2. Why? Maybe they had to encourage one another and say, "Hey, come on, lig jou, let's do this." And the battle's success, that's the last thing that we can learn, wasn't due to his military might, because he was a commander. But it was because of God's intervention. Whatever we do, if God is not part of that, if God doesn't show us and intervene for us, we are just going to use our own might, and the war will not be won. So let's read this in Judges 4:14 to 16. This is about a spiritual revelation and God's timing. Often we want to do the right thing, but we have to wait for God's timing as well, while doing the right thing. When he says go, listen to this. And Deborah said to Barak, this is verse 14, "Up," that was when they were in the field already. "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you? So be brave, God is with you." So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak at the edge of the sword. God just brought them to him. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. So he was obviously the king's commander and army, what do you call it, general or whatever he was. I don't know, something like that. But he was in charge of all of that. And God brought all of them to Barak. Verse 16, and Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoyim. And all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. So God kept his promise, but there was one person who got away. this commander of Canaan, Sisera. Remember, I just read, he jumped off from his chariot and he ran away. So Barak killed all the others, but this guy got away. So what was the final victory? What do you do if the commander of an army is not dead? Because he can always get more people, train them for his army. So the victory was not a final victory. Let's read on. He wasn't the sole hero in this story. Deborah's prophecy that the Lord will give the victory to a woman in verse 9 was not herself. It was not Deborah. But it was Jael. Someone that no one knew about. Actually, she was a Kenite. And they were at peace with the king Jabin of Canaan. They were friendly with each other. So he ran to their camp where they were, where the Kenites were. And listen to what she did. Let's read from, get a bladsy. 17. Verse 17 to 21. Judges 4, 17 to 21. And this is the story that happened there. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. They were peaceful. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent. And she covered him with a rug. Sy het hom bietjie weggesteek. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him again with this rug. And he said to her, now this guy is afraid because everybody has been slaughtered. He's the only one that they're looking for. "Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. She must have been quite familiar with this because they put up tents wherever they go. Then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was laying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. It's not a very pleasant story. I'm sorry. But it just shows you that God can use any person and any circumstance to accomplish his will. She was not even an Israelite. She was a Kenite. And she was the one who had the final victory, who killed the commander of the army. So what do we learn from this? God's plans often unfolds with unexpected people and methods. I wouldn't suggest that we do that. But be obedient to what he asks you to do, even if it doesn't sound what other people will. I mean, she, instead of her husband, she invited this person into her house. She was hospitable to him, and it's supposed to be the husband. So she sort of went against the customs a little bit. God can use anyone, regardless of nationality, gender, or status, to fulfill his purposes. Don't need a title, you don't need to look a certain way, you don't need to come from a certain place. He can use you. You too, he can use you. Her bold and brave action fulfilled Deborah's prophecy. She must have been bold. I mean, if that guy woke up. So she was really bold and brave. And that sealed Israel's victory. One act, one woman in her own tent, inspired by God, saved Israel. Guys, changed their outcome. Israel's victory. So you see, courage is not about not feeling fear. Courage is not present where there's no fear. Courage can be where there is a little fear. It's about choosing to act bravely even when we're afraid. And I think, Thaisa, dis jy wat dit altyd sê. Act. Yeah, that's it. Do it scared. Just do it. Be obedient. But do it scared then if you need to. And take someone with you. Because then you get the courage you need. She embraced a special moment, trusting wholeheartedly in what was right. You see, God values ability over status. Let me say that again. God values availability over status. You can be a doctor, something, whatever, but if you don't do what God asks you to do, it means nothing. I wrote here, and I think this is really important for us to hear this morning. We should be alert to moments when God calls us to take action. Most of us were not aware when we woke up this morning how much influence we will have in people's lives. But we should be awake. We should be aware of moments when God calls us to take action. We should see those moments in obedience. So that was the final victory. A woman, not an Israelite, living far away from the war scene, sitting in her tent, doing what she believed was right. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is the testimony. After victory, we've got a testimony. Well done. In Judges 5, we read the song of Deborah and Barak. And it's repeating what has happened, where they testify and celebrate God's victory. Because remember now, God brought the whole army in front of Barak. And God used a woman there far away to slaughter the commander of the army. God's victory. Their worship reflects the gratitude and acknowledgement that it was God's help, that they could not do it in their own strength. I wrote here, worship follows deliverance or victory. It's a vital response to God's faithfulness. We need to tell people how faithful God is, because they just read or see one side often. Do they hear about the stories of His faithfulness, how good He is? You can look in a mirror and al is jy nog steeds 5'2", dis okay. That you can overcome things in your life, that you can be set free of things, that you can be healed emotionally. We need to give Him the honor, because He's the one who does all this in our lives. So the song of Deborah and Barak was the testimony, but there was another testimony as well. The impact it had on Israel. Firstly, Judges 5:31 notes that Israel enjoyed peace for 40 years after that. Remember? 40 years. They were in slavery for 20 years. So God gave them 40 years after the victory of peace. The triumph led to them for renewed faith. They came back to God. They started serving Him again. There was national unity under God's leadership. So they bowed again. They came back to Him as their God. Knew who they were. We are Israelites, the covenant people of God. Let's go back to God. Look what He's done for us. So that's part of the testimony, the outcome of what happened, the impact that it had on Israel. And the songs were reminders later on for the next generations. They used to sing these songs over and over and over. And it was reminders to the later generations of God's faithfulness. And that's also part why we sing our songs. We tell the soul inside, come on, wake up. Serve your God. Worship your God. Remember what He has done for you. Many of our songs remind us of that as well. Do you remember who God is? He's Almighty God. He's the faithful one, the great one. Our songs remind us of that. Let's worship Him. Give yourself to Him. And then we experience His presence so wonderfully like we did this morning. So to conclude, we don't need a title or to be a leader or to be a whatever to be used by God. He wants to use you. And you, and you, and you. Everyone here. No one is disqualified. If you follow God, if you're a follower of Jesus, He wants to use you. You don't need to follow Jesus for 50 years before He can use you. Your house, your ordinary space, can become a place of divine intervention, where God works, where He changes people, where He heals, where He brings victory. Our houses, our places where we move, where we sit at and have coffee at, wherever. God can use you. God can intervene there. God honors those who respond with courage, wisdom, and faith. We need God's wisdom, and we need to believe in who He is. And God raises leaders who will listen, act, and empower others. That's what Deborah did. She listened to other people. She empowered them and acted as a judge for them. We can do that. All of us can do that. We're all leaders in our own circumstances. Whether you're a mom, you're a leader of children. So to end off, Deborah, Barak, and Jael's story affirms that God raises and uses people based on their calling, not their gender or their status, if only they are available. Are you available? I've written down 2 questions here. Ask yourself. Ask yourself. Me too. Where is God calling me to act boldly? Is there a place that He's been talking to you where He asks you to act boldly? And secondly, am I willing to be used? You know, Barak sort of pushed it away and went his way, and then Deborah had to call him back and say, hello, did you forget? Am I willing to be used even if I feel scared, unlikely, or unqualified? Amen. 3 people God used. that we probably wouldn't have chosen. Perik wanted to run away. Jael was just a woman, a wife, a mommy, or something. And Deborah, a woman, a judge, a prophetess.